In 1883, a single gunshot broke the silence over a town called Perdition Creek. And with that one echo, the most feared man west of the Pecos laid down his gun, and his name. They said Elijah Cross once killed a man for spitting too close to his boots. They said he gunned down 7 bounty hunters in one night, and never looked back. But what they didn't say, what history never wrote, was why a man like that would suddenly stop. Curiosity gap. Because the truth wasn't in the gunfights. It wasn't in the blood or the bounties or the bodies buried under desert stone. The truth was in a single letter. Found years later, sealed in a whiskey bottle, buried beneath the floorboards of a burned-down saloon. A letter written by Elijah Cross himself, the man who vanished after that final gunshot at Perdition Creek. And what was written in that letter wasn't just a confession. It was a revelation about the West, and what it truly means to kill a man. The town of Perdition Creek wasn't on any map. It sat between New Mexico's endless sands and the border of nowhere, a place the railroad forgot, and God never visited. The streets were lined with hollow saloons, broken shutters, and faces that had learned to stop hoping. And walking down that dirt road, coat torn by the wind, was Elijah Cross. A man once whispered about from Texas to Colorado. A name spoken like a warning, not a legend. His hat was low, his eyes half-shadowed, and his revolver hung from his hip like it was part of him, more faithful than any friend he'd ever had. But there was something new in his step that day. Not pride. Not anger. Something else. Something that looked an awful lot like tired. The West makes men, then eats them alive. Elijah Cross had been both the meal and the teeth. Years before that walk to Perdition Creek, Elijah wasn't the devil folks made him out to be. He'd been a Union soldier, 17 when the war spat him out. He'd seen men burned in their own uniforms, brothers shooting brothers over colors that bled the same when they hit the dust. And when the fighting stopped, he couldn't stop hearing the screams. So, he kept his gun, and went looking for quieter battles. That's how he became a bounty hunter. Not for justice. For noise. He needed something louder than his own thoughts, and for years, it worked. Every kill bought him silence. Until the day he met Jed Malone, his partner, his shadow, his one honest friend. Jed was the kind of man who laughed at death and prayed at sunrise. He was quicker with a story than a bullet, though both came fast when needed. Together, they cleaned out gangs from Kansas to the Rio Grande, for money, sure, but also for a strange kind of meaning. They thought they were lawmen without the law. But the line between bounty and murder blurs fast when gold's on the table. One night in San Pedro, they tracked down a wanted man, a rustler named Cole Avery. The bounty said alive, but Cole came out shooting, and Elijah shot back without thinking. When the dust cleared, Cole was on the ground, not dead, but barely breathing. Jed walked over, saw the man's young face, couldn't have been 20. He looked at Elijah and said, "He's just a boy, Eli. Let's get him to the dock." But Elijah didn't move. He stared at the kid, blood running through the dirt, and for a moment, saw himself on that Civil War field all over again. He lifted his gun, and ended the noise. Jed's voice broke after the shot. "You didn't have to do that." Elijah holstered the revolver and said, "You don't leave witnesses. Not in this world." That was the first crack in their friendship, and the first time Elijah Cross felt the silence turn into something worse, guilt. Months passed. The West kept turning. Bounties came and went. But word spread faster than any horse, about the kid Elijah killed. And soon, towns started closing their doors when he rode through. Even Jed couldn't look at him the same. Then came the letter. A bounty worth $500, more than they'd ever seen. The name was Sarah Avery. The sister of the rustler Elijah had killed. Wanted for robbery, suspected of murder. Jed hesitated. "You don't think?" Elijah nodded, cold as iron. "We finish what we started." They rode south, through dust storms and silence. Sarah wasn't hiding, she was hunting. When they found her, she was in a burned-out church, her revolver steady, her face as fierce as her brother's had been young. "You killed my blood," she said. "Now you'll see what it feels like to lose yours." Jed stepped forward, hand raised in peace. But Elijah drew first, instinct again, like a curse carved into his bones. The shot hit Jed. Not Sarah. Jed. He fell, eyes wide, confusion mixing with pain. And Elijah froze. For the first time in his life, his hands shook. Sarah could have killed him right then. But she didn't. She dropped the gun, stared at him with disgust, and whispered, "You're already dead." Then she walked away. And Elijah Cross fell to his knees beside his friend, who kept gasping the same word until the end. Why? For 3 days, Elijah buried Jed with his bare hands. No shovel. No prayer. Just sweat, blood, and guilt. When it was done, he took his gun belt and threw it into Perdition Creek, that same nameless stretch of desert where all the outlaws' ghosts went to rot. Then he walked into town and told the bartender, no more bounty. No more killing. No more Elijah Cross. He turned his back on the world that made him. But the world wasn't done with him. Because when men like Elijah disappear, somebody always comes looking. The year is 1883. Perdition Creek breathes like an old wound that never healed. The sun bleeds through the clouds in rusty streaks. And in a saloon with one working lantern and no laughter left, a man named Elijah Cross sits alone, a ghost waiting to be judged. He tends bar now. Not because he wants to, but because it's the only job that doesn't require drawing a gun. His hair's gone gray at the temples. His hands, once steady as fate, tremble slightly when he pours a drink. But people still whisper. They say he's the same man who once killed 7 bounty hunters in one night. Others say he's just a drunk with a haunted stare. Elijah doesn't correct any of them. Because in truth, he's both. One night, a storm rolls in, rare for the desert, heavy as guilt. Lightning flashes over Perdition Creek, and thunder shakes the bottles on the shelves. Elijah's alone, locking up for the night, when the door creaks open. A figure steps through the doorway, hat low, long coat dripping rain. A revolver glints beneath the coat. Elijah's voice is calm, almost resigned. Bars closed. The stranger doesn't move. Then, slowly, they lift their head. It's Sarah Avery. Older now. Hardened. Her eyes no longer burn with anger, they burn with purpose. "I'm not here for vengeance," she says. "Not anymore." She reaches into her coat, Elijah's hand twitches toward the counter. But instead of a gun, she pulls out a folded, yellowed envelope. "I came for this," she says. "It's yours." She sets it on the bar. The rain hits the roof like gunfire. Elijah stares at the letter, his name written in Jed's handwriting. He opens it slowly. Inside, the ink is faded but strong enough to cut through the years. "Eli, if you're reading this, I'm long gone, one way or another. I never blamed you for what happened. We both rode a path carved in sin long before that bullet flew. But there's something you should know. Sarah wasn't your bounty. She never was. That poster was forged, by a man named McCready. The same one who paid us to hunt her brother. He wanted her dead so no one could testify against him for the railroad killings. We were just the tools he used to bury the truth. If you've still got any mercy left in that iron heart, find her. Make it right. Maybe then, the noise in your head will stop. Jed." Elijah's breath catches. His world tilts. For years, he'd carried his guilt like penance, believing he'd destroyed everything that ever meant something. But now he knew the truth. Jed hadn't died because of vengeance. Jed had died because Elijah believed a lie. He looks up at Sarah. She's watching him, not with hate, but with the quiet sadness of someone who's seen too much. "McCready's dead," she says. "Railroad men took care of him when the money ran out." Elijah nods, slow. "Then I reckon there's no one left to kill." Sarah studies him. "That's not why I came. I thought you should know the truth before you die." Silence. Only the rain. Elijah folds the letter, places it in his pocket, and walks to the door. Outside, the storm's breaking, a pale dawn crawling across the desert. He stops in the doorway, glancing back at her. "You were right, back then," he says softly. "I was already dead. Just took me a while to notice." Sarah doesn't answer. He steps into the rain and starts walking, past the saloon, past the church ruins, toward Perdition Creek. The camera follows from behind, one lone man against the endless desert horizon. Hours later, a local rancher rides into town and finds the saloon empty, the back door open, and a revolver resting on the counter. Beside it, a whiskey bottle, sealed with wax. Inside, folded carefully, is Jed Malone's letter. And on the label, written in the same steady hand that once shook the West. "For whoever finds this, remember, killing a man's easy. It's living with it that takes a lifetime." That was the last anyone ever saw of Elijah Cross. Some say he walked into Perdition Creek and never came out. Others swear they saw him years later, tending horses for a church mission down south. But the truth? The desert keeps its secrets. Long after the gun smoke cleared from Perdition Creek, the stories faded, twisted by whiskey, retold by drifters, rewritten by men who never knew the truth. But every now and then, someone would pass through that stretch of desert and find something strange. A small wooden cross. A horseshoe half buried in sand. And footprints that led toward the horizon, and never came back. The preacher in Santa Fe said Elijah Cross found God. The sheriff in Abilene said he found the gallows. And the old barkeep who once served him swore he found peace. Maybe they were all right. The truth is, the West was never about right or wrong. It was about weight, the weight of what a man could live with. And Elijah Cross had carried more than most. He'd been a killer, a soldier, a friend, a sinner, all carved into one man who finally decided that silence was louder than bullets. And that's what made his story different. He didn't die in a blaze of glory. He chose to disappear. He walked out of history so the killing could stop with him. You see, the frontier wasn't just a place. It was a mirror. It showed a man what he really was when there were no rules left. Some men found justice. Some found gold. Elijah Cross found something rarer, forgiveness. Not from the world, that was never coming, but from himself. And maybe that's what redemption really means. Not erasing what you've done, but deciding to never let it happen again. The desert wind still carries his name, not as a warning, but as a whisper. A reminder that no matter how far a man rides, his past is the horse that always follows. But for some, in the end, the trail doesn't lead to vengeance or death. It leads to peace, and in the silence that followed, the West learned a truth it would never forget. That even the blackest soul can find light, if he has the courage to stop pulling the trigger.